Excuse me.
Mrs. O'Neill is here to see you.
Please have her wait. She usually drops in on her way downtown. Oh, I'd like to see her. Have Mrs. O'Neill come in.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you were busy. I'll wait.
Hello.
Hello.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Christina Lopes, who is the CEO and co-founder of One Health Company. Welcome to the show today.
Scott, thank you so much. It's a huge pleasure to be here.
All right. So, you were the managing director of Cerberus Capital, a PE firm, for many years, and now the startup. And I wonder if you could share your journey from the PE background to your current endeavor.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I always worked, kind of my meta mission has been to bring capital, people, ideas, technology to big unmet needs that maybe are not actually very well understood. So I used to call it like not in the zip code. So I worked a lot in actually emerging markets in developing countries. And so for Cerberus, I headed Latin America and Brazil. I'd worked before in all over the world, and mainly looking at agriculture, infrastructure, and eventually health. Lots of projects in clean energy. So I was looking for those interesting, much needed, where I could bring in, call it at the time was in New York City, the New York City world to address that, and kind of think of it as a win-win of, for good and for profit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Triple bottom line. There you go.
Absolutely.
Now, I know you've been super passionate about women's health and access to healthcare. Can you briefly share some of the projects and the roles that you've played or been involved with in that regard?
Absolutely. So I was advisory director for Planned Parenthood in the Western Hemisphere. So overseeing the entire hemisphere and actually enabling 30 million healthcare services a year. And frankly, to those that are most marginalized and unheard, everything from helping in disaster relief in Haiti to, all sorts of issues. Like, for example, Bolivia has one of the highest cervical cancer rates in the world. And lo and behold, there are like pre-cervical cancer vaccines. So bridging those worlds, really interesting to me. And it's just an amazing organization. I just cannot say how much. And I served with the grandson of Margaret Sanger, who founded it. She herself funded the birth control pill and really revolutionized what was family planning and not. So I'll give an example. I'm from Brazil, and my grandmother had 15 kids. And, my dad, her son had 2, so you see the intergenerational change. And I had a mentor, Lincoln Gordon, who had been the ambassador for Kennedy to Brazil and brought Planned Parenthood to Brazil. And he had met and grew up in Margaret Sanger's house and said she was the most charismatic person he ever met. And he had met everybody. He had many leadership roles in the world. So it was very interesting to bring all of this together and really move the needle for those who most need it. And also related to that role, participated in the United Nations Commission for the Status of Women. And that was fascinating for me because it's a document that gets written, and any new president that's stepping in will actually read that document. So it's not nothing. It shows what, all the countries at the UN, 160 something, are thinking on a topic. And this topic is women. And so, when you start talking about certain rights, and the countries come in and there are angles, it's really important to kind of edge, in my mind, what's the guiding principle, which is to be supportive, adolescent health, education, really women's rights. But you'd be surprised how much tension there is in that. And, we want to tip it the right way. But one thing that then kind of brings me to what I'm doing now is, I would say, I really, kind of have a mission to help serve those that are marginalized and voiceless. I didn't really mean dogs at the moment, but I was saying voiceless, and dogs don't talk. So that was just like a fun thing of what you say actually comes through.
Well, I think that I have a feeling that your background and your passion for women's rights is still going to come through. We'll wait a few minutes into the conversation for that. But since you mentioned your startup, One Health Company, can you talk about what it does and how you guys are focusing on cancer treatment for dogs?
Absolutely. So, my co-founder is a veterinarian, Ben Lewis, and he went to vet school, and he, one day said to me, it's amazing how on one hand you have all these animals who need care, they just need access to the cutting edge technology. And then you have, on the other hand, the R&D world, the pharma, biotech world that needs animals, basically animal testing, and use kind of lab animals, and there's no kind of connection, right? And from a species point of view, couldn't we do better? Couldn't we actually help take, for example, the dog who is used in R&D and reimagine the dog not as a subject but as a patient, and learn a lot, and actually benefit that dog as a patient? And this is a bit wild and radical, but it is the kind of foundational ethical principle about what we're doing. I thought this was fabulous and kind of fit with my life journey of finding these unusual but massively big problems. And specifically with dogs and cancer, I didn't know beforehand. I have had dog that has had cancer. My dad had terminal cancer and I took care of him end of life. So I've been like sensitized, but until I really started looking, understanding this, I learned that there are 6 million dogs diagnosed in the US alone for cancer every year. And for comparison, Scott, it's about 1.8 million people that are diagnosed every year in the US. So you can see that the incidence and prevalence of cancer is very high in dogs. It's the number one disease killer. And yet dogs are participating in R&D as the beagles, they get tested on, but are not seeing a benefit. And I thought that this is old, this is 20th century. We're in 21st century. We're in a circular world, a circular economy, in a world that, why would you do that? There's got to be a better way. And so One Health, the meta name of our company, is actually a movement. And it's a movement of the oneness between us and the shared health and disease. And what can we learn cross species, actually, and benefit each other and the globe. And so that's kind of the original, call it the genesis of the idea and the inspiration and where we're coming from. And you can see it's a continuation in a way. Let me pause there and just check. Is that where you were?
Yeah. I think that's spot on. Can you talk specifically about Fidocure and the approach that you guys are taking in terms of cancer treatment?
Absolutely. So again, in that spirit of, what are tools we could take that are 21st century tools? We know human R&D in oncology has gone, it's one of the really interesting areas. There's been a lot that's been, discovered, and could we bring that back to the dog? And so we figured out that the whole world of precision medicine or personalized medicine that looks at a tumor beyond just where it is, if it's breast or colon, and actually looks at the genomics of the tumor. So really what's driving the tumor. And that's been, there was a Nobel Prize around the oncogene that figured out that cancer is a genetic disease. So looking looking at the DNA and everything's really important. It's a really critical piece of information. Not the only one, cancer is multifactorial and complicated, which is kind of why I like it. But this is a very important piece of information, and the whole, veterinary space was just without it. While in the human space, more and more genomic testing is part of care. It's more guided care versus just, looking at one data point, which is where's the tumor and some histology. So we brought that to the dog and actually also enabled targeted therapies. So therapies that do what they say, which is they target those mutations. And they're oral capsules, so they're not chemo radiation. They may be used in combination, but it's an entirely new class of drugs from this century that just takes a completely different approach, and a very important approach, amidst, again, kind of a big umbrella of everything you need to really fight and crush cancer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's a couple of dimensions, right? So there's been a pretty big growth around genomics and DNA types of companies that are consumer facing, and now you guys are doing it for dogs. In addition to that, you're also applying targeted therapies as well. On the therapy side, how does it work in terms of patents and licensing, or are these completely your own proprietary sets of therapies that I can't
Great
imagine?
question.
Yeah.
So we only work with FDA-approved
Okay.
therapies that have been approved for humans. Okay, so we only work in that world because we want to be mindful of the risks, right? And also accelerate, kind of like think, what tools can we lift from the human world and almost repurpose or translate to the dog? So what are low-hanging fruits? So so to think about the world of R&D, it's really focused on humans. So there's really not, I think no chemotherapy, for example, is approved for dogs. So there's not much that's approved for another species. Here and there's something. But for example, if you have the tiger in the zoo, like there's not a drug for the tiger. You're going to take a human, right, therapeutic. And so there are legal frameworks that allow you to do that, called MDUCA, that if a patient, a veterinary, like an animal patient's life is at risk, the veterinarian can prescribe a human, as long as it's FDA approved, therapeutic. So we're able to do that from the get-go. And so, that's been a beautiful thing. The key missing links, why it wasn't done before, is nobody had really gone in to understand what safety data there was existing already. That was really done in the Beagles, actually. And also the dosing and the regimen, all of that was not a very clear world. So we really, from the get-go, honed in very tightly, brought in the brain trust of the world, of the folks in academia who knew this and had been already kind of cutting edge, but they had been in little silos. So we just brought it together, and kind of as a Silicon Valley company, we're able to really kind of codify and create a database and drug rules and algorithms and whatnot. Just take it to the whole next level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's hugely valuable, especially for biotech and pharmaceuticals, right? Because now they're taking something that's already within their product portfolio, and now you're actually providing, empirical data and clinical data, really, to be able to actually have more validity and results that's targeted to, canine in this case. So that has huge economic value. Now, in this process, are you guys also developing your own therapies as well? Is that at some point in the product development?
Yeah, so what we're mostly interrogating are questions around combinations of drugs. So again, coming from the oncology paradigm and thinking, which is the current thinking, that most likely it's more like HIV/AIDS. One drug doesn't work, two drugs don't work, three, four. It's like a combination, and then you turn the disease from death sentence to almost like chronic disease. So it's a very similar thinking for oncology. So basically, what we're mostly focused on are, what could we combine, and when do you combine it, And those are really huge questions that the human world is after and we're after. It's really like the solving the puzzle of oncology. We're also working on early detection tests, so liquid biopsy. So this whole idea, like we're just kind of, at the high level thinking, how do we really turn this around, like really turn this around? So not just a little incremental help, but, and we defined that helping to crush cancer in dogs starts with one, the earlier detection. It's really critical. And then two, combinatorial, basically formulations and understanding how to combine, what to combine. So that's been the goal that we're very honed in on and looking at IP and et cetera.
So I'm gonna see if I could. I'm not sure if it's gonna make sense, but let's see if we can tie it back to your current as well as past work around women's rights and access to healthcare for women and so forth. The research that you're doing and essentially the clinical data that you guys are amassing around, in particular, the combination of the drug cocktail for cancer treatment is hugely valuable. And let me see if I can phrase it properly. In a traditional FDA, again, we're talking about these are already FDA grade. However, in a traditional kind of a biotech, let's say, is you have to go through the clinical phase and then clinical phase 1, 2, and 3. In some ways, what you're doing is have incorporated the process in such a way that usually preclinical, like animal testing, typically ends up being a cost center. But here, you guys are able to actually profit or generate a revenue while you're still actually generating data, valuable clinical data that can be then used, in this case, at some point, to human pharmacology, and including, of course, women's health and cure for cancer. Is that too far off?
I think you're right on in the sense that, first and foremost, mission one is to help the dogs, right? And to be very mission aligned. And we're fortunate to have amazing VC backers with us that are really helping to underwrite a lot of it, right? We're not just leaning on the market for that. But you are correct that then kind of phase two is we're correlating, we already are, biomarkers and combinations of drugs. So that's really, really, really interesting. And we're doing it very much mindfully for the dog, but that has absolutely implications for the broader, I'm doing a circle here with my hand, almost a flywheel of greater R&D. And in this journey, we're learning where is the homology, where is the similarity between human cancer and canine cancer. So we can really go into that sweet spot and almost think of like maximum benefit. Do you know what I mean? On the two sides, both sides of the leash. That's kind of a motto we're really excited about. And because the dog, as you rightly pointed, is already part of R&D. It's not, a species that's out. It's actually a continuum. And this notion of bringing in data from spontaneously sick pet patients like dogs, it's not entirely new from us. We're just, again, amplifying it in a much bigger and more meaningful way. But universities have been doing it. There are departments who look at that. There are many manuscripts and papers in peer-reviewed journals. There's actually therapies that have already. There's a pretty interesting lymphoma drug that came to market very much because of leveraging lymphoma in pet dogs. So kind of two sides of the street. So absolutely. So this is a way that it ties together. There's also something, Scott, that how this all fits together that maybe is not super obvious, but I'm very thrilled about, which is most veterinarians are women. So it's really interesting. I've never worked in an industry that is really almost, it's like 80% women. So I'm actually find it fascinating and really relish, what can I do there to help, create again a truly embracing more gender parity. Our company has to look like our clients, right? Like who we serve. So while we can't be dogs, but we can definitely be the veterinarians that are on the front line and doing remarkable work, especially in COVID. Really, they're just amazing people. So we feel really fortunate. So that's a way where it helps, what we're doing helps human. Potentially even we have some research coming out about BRCA, which is usually related to women and breast cancer. We're seeing it in dogs. So that's a way where that ties together, but also in the sense of the space being, really the vet schools are mostly now all women. And it's just exciting for me. I've never actually done that in such a way.
Well, I think it's terrific when all the stars align and your interests, your passions, and your work align and intersect. So that's terrific. I sense that One Health company has a bigger ambition, and I think Fidocure appears to be just one of many potential products to be rolled out. What is kind of the longer term perspective around where the company will go, whether it's canine, whether it's human, or something else? And what are some of the near term development things that you can actually talk about?
Oh, absolutely. So we for sure, again, the both sides of the leash is critical. It's really critical for our work. So I can tell you, in that continuum for us, I think we'll be working in it. Like that's will be sustained, but that's pretty huge, right? So one area in terms of the vision and aligning even to the present is we're already impacting human R&D. So all of this that you and I, Scott, are saying is not out there. We already partnered with Global Pharma ASI and helped them on a drug that they had that was already FDA approved. So had one indication in breast cancer. So there you go. It's a beautiful story because it's actually a drug that comes from a sea sponge in North Japan. So imagine this is deep now, right? So and then the concept was, can this help a type of sarcoma, different type of cancer? And we helped with our canine data, and lo and behold, that really helped them move the drug forward, and it's actually now at the clinic in Mass General, which is phenomenal, right? And so to have already had that impact is whoa. I mean, gives me the goose pimples, because the type of sarcoma for humans is one of those that there's not many options. So we're here tying so many aspects of this planet of ours together, and really breaking through the barriers of any species and hierarchy, and moving something forward that can benefit in such a beautiful and profound way. So this has been, I'm incredibly grateful for that. And of course, we're thinking for the future, what more could we do, right? This is already incredible. So that's for sure one whole area. And then we think of areas, perhaps, beyond cancer, right? Where we're learning about the dog, we're learning about the journey, the life journey of the dog. We're looking a lot also, cancer is related a lot to aging, for example. And so there's all sorts of questions we can start to interrogate there, and perhaps and learn more. And who knows, again, that might impact the dog or humans. And certainly anything in terms of the earlier detection and monitoring of cancer to avoid it, once it goes metastatic, is a real issue. So anything we can do to intercept early, pre-malignancy interception is really critical. So all of these things, I'm sure, will be in conversation as we evolve and there are more interesting findings.
Well, terrific. I wish we had more time. I think the work that you guys are doing is terrific. It's really helping the voiceless, truly, in the sense of rights for animals, as well as the keen insights that we can gain from them in terms of the additional value add that we can get from their genomics, as well as the cocktail and the combination of FDA-approved drugs. So with that, I've been joined by Christina Lopes, who is the CEO of One Health Company.
Thank you so much, Scott.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.